Hi everyone, I'm Courtney Lee, manager of the Women's Skydiving Leadership Network, here to bring you another installment in our monthly video lecture series. This lecture is given by Laura Golly, marketing manager at SunPath, and it's called Girls Can't Fly Parachutes. I first saw Laura, along with her partner Allison Ray, give this presentation at the PIA Symposium last February, and it was just incredible. They did such a good job unpacking some of the myths and misconceptions related to women as canopy pilots. I got a lot out of it when I saw it, and I'm sure you'll be able to say the same at the end. So thanks, Laura, for all your hard work and being willing to help out. And everyone else, I hope you enjoy Girls Can't Fly Parachutes.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Golly. I am the marketing manager at SunPath Products, and today I'm going to be talking about a subject that I am super passionate about, which is women and canopy progression. This seminar is called Girls Can't Fly Parachutes, and I originally developed it in 2016 while I was working at Performance Designs, and I worked on it with a coworker of mine, Allison Ray. She's an amazing friend and a really good canopy pilot, and I just wanted to shout out to her because a lot of the ideas I'm going to talk about today are hers. So let's just jump right in. Let's start out by talking about some statistics about women in skydiving. So about 12% of skydivers in the United States are women, and we see the same number, around 13%, go on to pursue instructional ratings. So that would be something like becoming an AFF instructor, a tandem instructor, or getting a coach rating. We see even greater numbers of women, 21%, go compete at the USPA National Skydiving Championships every year. So about 1 in 5 people who are competing there are women. So it shows that there's a lot of interest from girls to go achieve and compete in higher levels of the sport. On the flip side, only about 7% of the people who show up to the USPA National Canopy Piloting Championships every year are women. So in real terms, that's about 4 or 5 girls that show up to compete, which really isn't a lot. And although I don't have any statistics on it or numbers to back it up, just from my personal observation, I noticed that a lot more men than women get into things like swooping at their drop zone, even if it's not competitive, or doing things like XRW and other canopy-related disciplines. So Allison and I went out and talked to a lot of men and women about why they think women are not trying to achieve a higher level in canopy piloting, or why women seem to struggle with flying parachutes. And these are some of the things that we got back. So a lot of people said that it's because women have poor depth perception and therefore really struggle with flare timing, that women aren't aggressive enough and downsize too slowly, that women are just naturally more afraid of skydiving in general, and therefore they don't want to go on to compete or achieve a higher level in any discipline, that women aren't strong enough to flare large parachutes, and that women are not confident under canopy, which leads to poor decision making. So we went out and interviewed a bunch of people, and we got some of those interviews on video. Here's some women talking about their experience at their drop zone and what people said to them about parachute flight.
My AFF instructor actually told me that I would never be able to land a parachute and that I should pretty much quit skydiving and stick to cheerleading. So here I am, flying a 64 square foot parachute with a 3.2 wing loading. So I think that in general, yeah, if we instill the confidence in women that we can do this, we can land a canopy just fine, that they would go up already believing in themselves.
I started skydiving in a small drop zone in France, and for sure everybody was making fun of the girls. Like, the small mistake would become big jokes, and it's just this natural environment that everybody just jokes about the woman being bad canopy pilot, crashing in the tree, or like all the little things, but it's definitely an environment.
I was never told that women are not going to be as good canopy flyers as men, but I think as far as expectations, there's a bit more of an expectation from a guy to progress faster as far as the type of canopies they're flying. And with women, there's an expectation to kind of hand back.
I think what holds women back under canopy is a lack of confidence and a lack of self-belief, not a lack of natural talent.
I think realistically there shouldn't be any difference whatsoever. It doesn't make any difference, right? So
Okay, so the overwhelming thing that we hear from men and from women is that women just tend to lack confidence under canopy, and it leads to being a poor canopy pilot. But are women born afraid of parachutes? Absolutely not. It's not as if you showed up to your first day of skydiving thinking to yourself, wow, I'm super excited to learn how to skydive, but I think I'm going to be bad at flying and landing my parachute. That's not what happens. So where does this self-doubt come from? Where does this lack of confidence among women stem from? And when it all boils down to it, it comes from two things. The first is that women are told, sometimes from their first jump and generally from an instructor, that they're probably going to be pretty good at free fall, but they're going to tend to struggle under canopy, especially in comparison to men. The second thing that happens is that same woman then goes out and has a negative experience under canopy. So maybe it was a bad landing or a scary experience landing off. And instead of evaluating that situation, taking all of the factors into account, that woman probably looks at it and goes, well, I've already been told I'm going to be bad at flying a parachute, and here I have this evidence that I just biffed in a landing, so I guess it's just because girls aren't good at flying canopies. In reality, this incident has nothing to do with the person involved being a woman and everything to do with the canopy progression that led up to the incident, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So we're going to start off by talking about a typical progression for a male, for an average skydiver, which is an 175-pound male. So this guy is going to go out, he's going to do 1 to 40 jumps under student canopies and probably rental gear at his drop zone, probably starting at a 260, a 230, downsizing to a 210, somewhere in there. After about 40 jumps, that student is going to go to his instructor and say, hey, I love skydiving. I'm ready to commit and buy some gear. What do you think I should buy? And 9 times out of 10, that instructor is going to say, I think you should start at something that puts you around a 1-to-1 wing loading. So this male skydiver is going to go out and buy a 1-to-1 wing loading canopy, which might be a Sabre 210, maybe it's a Sabre 190, and he's going to do a series of jumps on that. And then downsize, do another 150, 200 jumps, downsize, until he gets down to around a Sabre 135 at around 600, 700 jumps, somewhere in there. And it puts him at around a 1.5 to 1 wing loading. This is by no means a recommended progression. This is just what I would call maybe the center of the bell curve for canopy progressions that you see for the average guy. So for the sake of argument, we're going to say that this male student went through AFF at the same time as a female student. And the female student does the exact same number of jumps as the male. She has the same instructor, they're at the same drop zone, and they downsize at exactly the same rate. So let's say this girl is 125 pounds, kind of an average girl, and she does jump number 1 to 40, the same thing as the guy on student parachutes. She goes to the exact same instructor and says, hey, I'm ready to buy my own gear. What do you think I should get? And the instructor is going to give her the same advice, which is that you should probably start on a canopy that puts you around a 1-to-1 wing loading. So she's going to go out and buy a 150. She'll do the same number of jumps and downsize to a 135. 150, 200 jumps later, downsize to a 120, do some more jumps, downsize to a 107, and then basically be in this position to where she's got to downsize onto a different type of parachute from there because she's kind of running out of types of parachutes that she can jump in that size. So we're going to talk about why the female progression, although she's jumping the same types of parachutes at the same wing loading, why she is set up for failure much more so than the male student in this example. So the first reason is the jump between the canopies she was jumping as a student or as a very newly licensed skydiver on rental gear, the jump in the size of those parachutes to the first canopy she bought, which was a 150. So more than likely, the rental gear available to her was a 210 or maybe a 190 And from there, it's a 40 square foot jump to get down to a 150, which is a huge jump in parachute size. In comparison to the guy who was probably in his first 40 jumps, he jumped a Sabre 2 260, a Navigator 260, maybe a Sabre 2 230, and then a Sabre 2 210. And then when he went to buy his first canopy, it might have also been a 210 or maybe a 190. So he had a 0 to 20 square foot jump between his rental gear and the first parachute he bought. On their 41st jump, more than likely that female student is going to look up at that parachute and think, wow, this is different and it's scary. So she's already defensively flying from that very first jump on her own canopy. The second reason that she's set up for failure here has a lot to do with handling of different size parachutes. So we're going to use the example that we have towards the bottom of the screen here of the Sabre 2 170 that the male is jumping at a 1.2 to 1 wing loading at around 300 jumps. And at the same time, the female is jumping the Sabre 2 120 at a very similar wing loading with the exact same amount of jumps. So to understand why she's going to struggle with that, it's important to understand the difference between speed and handling. So speed is how fast a parachute is moving through the air or across the ground. The handling is the responsiveness of that parachute in turns, the sensitivity and the flare timing, and the overall controllability of the parachute from opening to landing. So how does the change in canopy size affect the speed and handling? And we're going to assume that all other factors are constant, as I mentioned earlier. So the wing loading, type of wing, the drop zone, the weather, etc. The speed of those two parachutes is going to remain generally constant. But the handling of the smaller canopy is going to be a lot more sensitive to inputs and aggressive. So although they have a lot of factors in common here, the woman is being challenged to jump a much more aggressive canopy at the same jump numbers as the man. Another factor that's at play here is that if the man and the woman downsize at the same rate, the woman's just simply going to run out of parachutes to jump. By the time she gets to a Sabre 2 107, she doesn't really have anywhere to go from there other than a sub 100 square foot non-cross brace canopy or maybe something like a Velocity 103, which either of those options are going to be extremely aggressive at a relatively low jump number of 5 or 600 jumps. So we're probably not going to see a whole lot of women getting that far down this progression on the right. More than likely what's going to happen is progression B here, and this is called the progression of getting stuck. So in this example, which is a little bit more real world, on the right you can see the woman does jump number 1 to 40 and gets to 150 like her instructor recommended, and she's going to spend a whole bunch of time on that canopy. And the reason she's going to stay there forever, for up to 1,000 jumps, maybe more, is because when she first got that 150, it was scary because it was a big jump from the canopies that she was jumping with her rental gear, and because that Sabre 2 150 loaded at 1-to-1 is a very aggressive canopy in comparison to that Sabre 2 210 that her male counterpart is jumping at a 1-to-1. So we interviewed some women about this and talked to them about the canopies that they started jumping and how many jumps they did on them. And here's what they had to say.
The first canopy I bought was an Electra 150. And so I guess my wing loading was about a 0.9 or 1 on something like that. And I kept it until I had 1,000 jumps.
My first parachute was a Sabre 170, I think. So probably a similar wing loading to you. And then I shifted to a 150 very quickly and did 500 jumps or something on that.
I did a bunch of jumps on a 170, but the first canopy I purchased was a Sabre 2 150, and probably less than a 1. I jumped it for quite a while as well.
Yeah, when I started skydiving, I wasn't about canopy flight at all. I was into FS, I was competing at 4-way and 8-way, and I was all about the training, and I didn't really know much about my canopy or how to fly it. I was an incredibly mediocre pilot, very mediocre.
For me, I was just happy with it. I was flying safely. I never scared myself. Like the canopy part was kind of uneventful to me. I was very focused on the free fall part, and I just needed something to get back to the ground, and I never put too much thought or effort into it.
Yeah, it was the same for me as with Domi. It was not even really a part of the sport that I was considering. It was just the part that got me down safely after I'd been involved in free fall.
So one of the big issues that we find is girls staying on canopies that are too big for them because of advice that they get from instructors or their friends. And a lot of times we see girls downsizing to canopies that they shouldn't really be on, or changing types of parachutes that they really shouldn't be jumping, and then it ends up resulting in injury.
Yeah, a lot of women the petite women are given the advice, you need to start out with this magical 1-to-1 wing loading, and that will put them on a 120 or something like that. And then these poor women don't have the experience for it, and they have gear fear. That's what I call it, gear fear. And there is no magical start for the wing loader. You start on what's right for your experience level, and it's not going to be a 120.
So the moral of the story here is that this really has nothing to do with gender at all, and it has everything to do with the weight of the jumper and the size of the parachutes that they choose to jump. The problem isn't that girls can't fly parachutes. The problem is that, due to advice that we get at our drop zone, smaller people tend to start out at smaller canopies, which are more difficult and aggressive to fly. And because women make up the majority of smaller jumpers in the sport, women are disproportionately challenged to jump wings that are beyond their experience level. Hence, the reason that people see women struggle with canopies and therefore think that it's a gender thing, but it's not. So, let's talk about some considerations to keep in mind. These are some questions that I've gotten as I've given this seminar in the past, and it's some good stuff to know if you're trying to evaluate your own canopy progression. So the first one is, in practical terms, there's no such thing as underloading a parachute. It is perfectly safe to jump a wing at a 0.7, 0.8, or 0.9 wing loading. It's not going to spontaneously combust. You can do it. Backing up under canopy, so to speak, is not a reason to downsize. If you are finding yourself in a position where your main motivator for downsizing is so that you can jump in higher winds, I strongly recommend you reevaluate that reasoning and reconsider that option, because there's probably a whole lot that you could learn on the parachute that you're jumping right now. It's okay to fly more aggressive wings at lighter wing loadings. I've heard before, that you've got to be at least 1.5 to jump that wing because otherwise it doesn't fly right. And that's simply not the case. It's okay if you're jumping like a Sabre 2 135 and you want something a little bit more aggressive, but maybe don't feel like you want to downsize yet. It's okay to move laterally over to something like a Katana 135, which is a lot more of an aggressive wing, but it is going to teach you a lot, but you're not going to lose the square footage over your head. Keep in mind there's always going to be people who are naturally talented at flying their canopies and people who struggle. And if you're one of those people that struggle, it is okay. Seek out some canopy coaching. Work with coaches in your area. Use the resources that are available to you online. There's some amazing articles and publications written out there that have been super helpful to me over the years, and I'm sure will be to you. And just try and seek out some good advice and just have fun with it. I promise the more that you dedicate to developing the skill, the more fun that you're going to have at skydiving in general. Know that canopy progression isn't just about downsizing. I know I've talked a lot about downsizing in this talk, but there's so much more to learning how to fly a parachute than downsizing. Also, downsizing is not the enemy. I don't want you to walk away from this thinking that you should never ever downsize and downsizing is scary, because it's not. Once you've mastered a canopy, you've gone through a downsizing checklist. You can land crosswind, into the wind, downwind. You can do your brake turns. You know what your riser inputs do. It is absolutely okay to downsize at that point if you feel ready to and if you want to. One other thing I want to mention is that I know that it's hard to find containers that fit larger canopies and are built for small size people. Man, I know that that's tough, but they are out there and they can be made. So if you're in a situation of buying gear and you're looking for a container that's going to fit a larger canopy and you're struggling to find something, please don't just buy a small container and put a small parachute in it for that sole purpose. You might have to buy something new, and that's unfortunate if you're not in the position of wanting to buy new, but it's better to do that than to take what you can get on the used market and jump a canopy that you may get injured on. So a lot of people also have asked me, in this seminar I show a lot of don't do this progressions. And I've gotten the question, well, what should I do? Show me an ideal canopy progression. And so I put this together, this progression C, and it says 125-pound female here, but I think I should have written 125-pound person, because that's really what we're talking about, is just a lightweight person canopy progression. So here's what I would recommend. Jump your student gear for a little while and your rental gear at your drop zone, and when you do go buy your first parachute, make it something that's a little closer to what you were jumping when you were renting. Don't make it 40, 50, 60 square foot jump from your rental gear to your first canopy. And then when you're ready and you feel like you've mastered everything that comes on a downsizing checklist, and you feel like you've mastered that parachute and you've talked to your instructors and you want to go down, downsize. That's totally awesome. Downsize. It's fun. And then once you've mastered that parachute and you feel ready with the same qualifications I mentioned earlier, downsize again. Maybe you get to a point where you don't want to downsize, like towards the bottom of this list where I show Sabre 2120, and you just want to get a more aggressive wing in the same number of square feet, and that's totally cool too. Go over to a Katana or a Crossfire or something like that. Okay, so how can we solve this problem as a community in our sport? And I think that what we all need to do is just try to change the environment of our own drop zones and leave gender out of it. If you hear somebody at your drop zone talking about gender in relation to canopy piloting, try to say something, especially if a girl is standing there absorbing all this information as a really young jumper. Try to be a mentor in that environment. If you are in the position where you are able, experienced enough that you're giving people advice on what canopies they should be buying, make sure that in addition to their skill level, their jump numbers, their type of parachute, and the maybe the recommendations that country has, that country's parachute organization has for what canopy you can jump at what jump number, also include jumper weight into that evaluation when you talk to the person about what canopy they should be jumping. Get coaching if you are, just get coaching no matter what. Doesn't matter where you are on this scale. If you're super awesome, if you're struggling, it doesn't matter. Everybody benefits from canopy coaching. And if you're in the position that you can bring coaching to your drop zone, do it. Jeannie Bartholomew and Maxine Tate are two people that appeared in this seminar who are both amazing female canopy pilots and would be an awesome resource for you. And the last thing, like I mentioned, is reference a downsizing checklist. If coaching maybe isn't immediately available to you and you're thinking of downsizing, look at a downsizing checklist. Several canopy manufacturers have made them. It includes just a basic set of skills that you should have before moving on to a more aggressive wing. Just take a look at it, check it out, and see if you honestly evaluate your skills, and if you're ready to downsize, then do it. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this seminar. Again, my name is Laura Golly. If you have any questions, my email address is laura@sunpath.com, and I would love to talk to you about anything that I've said here and elaborate more. I just want to thank Jeanette and Courtney for having me on to talk today, and thank you guys so much. Women in skydiving are so amazing, and I feel really lucky to be a part of this community. So, all right, have a good one, get out there, have fun, and I will see you next time.
Rhythm Skydiving 101, the first app designed specifically for the new skydiving. Over 50 topics will get you from the ground to the air and back again. Available free for both Android and iPhone. Download Rhythm Skydiving 101 now and make every skydive count.